Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. It is about a woman who gave everything to her marriage, only to have her heart broken again and again by the man she trusted most. The story comes from a woman I'll call Elena, who is now 29 years old, living in a quiet town outside of Portland, Oregon. She shared her painful journey with her soon-to-be ex-husband, Thomas, who is 30. Their story began nearly 8 years ago, and after dating for several years, they were married for just over 2.5. Together, they have a young daughter, a little girl who became the center of Elena's world. In May of 2019, Elena's life was torn apart. Almost overnight, Thomas walked out on her and their toddler. He returned to his hometown without a clear explanation, saying only that he felt they should never have married in the first place. His words cut deep, but the suddenness of it left Elena stunned and heartbroken. She was left to shoulder the responsibilities of single motherhood while trying to understand why the man she loved had chosen to abandon them so abruptly. A couple of months later, in July, Thomas seemed to have a change of heart. He reached out to Elena, telling her he wanted to come back, to rebuild their family, to try again. Still carrying the weight of love and hope, she agreed to make an effort. At that time, Thomas was still working in his hometown, while Elena was in a different city. She told herself she would stay at her job for a few months, build her resume, and then begin searching for positions near him so they could be together again. The next 6 months were brutal. Elena endured long commutes, raised their daughter during the week almost entirely on her own, and spent weekends driving back and forth just to see Thomas. She went to interviews, bent over backward to keep the fragile promise of a family alive. By December, her sacrifices seemed to finally pay off. She landed a great job near his hometown, and she and Thomas had just bought a house together. She was 1 week away from moving in, from starting this new chapter. But then, everything came crashing down. Elena discovered that Thomas had been having an affair. He begged her not to leave, pleaded for another chance, swore he would cut off all contact with the other woman, against her better judgment, and because she still desperately wanted to believe in the marriage they had built. Elena forgave him. She gave him one more chance. 2 days later, while she was finishing her final week at her old job, she saw the truth. Thomas had unblocked the other woman on social media, liking her pictures again as though nothing had changed. The betrayal crushed her. To make matters even worse, Thomas kicked Elena out of the house they were supposed to share, leaving her to find another place to live just 2 days before she was supposed to begin her new position. From that point on, they lived separately. Thomas grew increasingly cruel, saying hateful things and repeating over and over that he wanted a divorce. He continued seeing the other woman, and Elena even caught her car outside his house. She took photos for her lawyer. More evidence of his lies. Despite all of this, she still tried to maintain communication for the sake of their daughter. A month ago, Elena finally stopped chasing him, stopped hoping he would change, stopped what she called the pick-me dance. But suddenly, Thomas changed his tune again. He unfollowed the woman on everything, unliked her pictures, and came back begging for another chance. He told Elena not to give up on their family. He told her he would do anything, but his words rang hollow. Elena no longer felt the same. She had been hurt too deeply, betrayed too many times. She had been discarded and humiliated by the man who was supposed to protect her heart. She no longer wanted to save their marriage, and she was terrified of sounding heartless when she told him there was no chance left. She wanted to protect her ability to co-parent for the sake of her child. But every friendly word she offered seemed to give him false hope. She tried to explain her feelings, but Thomas ignored them. He said he would never stop trying to win her back. He refused the idea of divorce, even as Elena made it clear that divorce was the only future she wanted. When Elena asked him why he suddenly wanted her again after so much cruelty, his response was chilling. He said it was because she seemed stronger. The irony broke her heart all over again. The man who had abandoned her, betrayed her, and hurt her countless times now wanted her simply because she no longer seemed broken. And yet, through the pain, Elena realized something important. She no longer needed him to feel whole. She could build a life for herself and her daughter. A life free from betrayal. A life where her strength was her own. Some people told Elena she was being too kind, worrying about seeming heartless to someone who had abandoned both her and her daughter. They reminded her that trust is one of the most important aspects of any relationship. And Thomas had destroyed it beyond repair. There could be no more chances because there was no more trust. If he wanted to prove himself trustworthy now, he could only do so by being a good father, by being present and responsible for their child. That was the only relationship left between them. Nothing more. Elena admitted she felt foolish when she looked back on her old posts. She hated how naive she had been, how she had believed him when he swore he would change, how she let herself think that he would never cheat again. Reading through her own history felt like reading a diary written by someone still desperate to hold on to a dream that was already gone. She winced at her words, at her hope, at her willingness to forgive. Then came the update. Elena explained that her instincts had been right all along, while Thomas was begging her for another chance, swearing this time would be different. He was still sleeping with the woman he had betrayed her with. He was still telling that woman he loved her and would do anything to make their relationship work. The betrayal no longer surprised her. In fact, when she found out, it did not even hurt. She had been expecting it. Instead of pain, she felt clarity. The guilt that had weighed her down evaporated. She filed for divorce, and she thanked the universe every single day that she would no longer be tied to Thomas in any romantic way. It felt like an enormous weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The constant dread, the endless waiting for him to change, the heartbreak of his betrayals, suddenly, all of it was gone. Shortly after her original post, something unexpected happened. At a wedding she attended, she met someone by chance. And against all odds, she fell in love. This new person was everything Thomas was not. He showed her kindness, compassion, and respect. He not only treated Elena with care, but also embraced her daughter with love and gentleness. For the first time in years, Elena felt what it meant to be safe, what it meant to be cherished, what it meant to have a partner who did not tear her down but lifted her up. It felt like something out of a dream. She realized that she had never truly known what love could feel like until now. To anyone listening who might be stuck in a loveless or toxic marriage, Elena wanted to send a message: leave. Do the hard thing. Do not wait for change that will never come. Do not believe promises from someone who has already proven that their word means nothing. If they have a pattern of leaving, cheating, and coming back, it will only repeat again and again. Elena admitted she had once been terrified to cut the cord. At one point, she even started to feel bad for Thomas because of how desperately he begged her for another chance. He told her every single day that divorce would ruin her, ruin their daughter, ruin their family. He said their child would grow up in a broken home. But Elena eventually realized the truth. The home had already been broken. Divorce was not what destroyed it. It was what finally gave her the chance to fix it. Once she made the decision, she began to thrive. She found her independence. She discovered that she could stand on her own and still be happy. She found love again, real love, the kind that did not make her question her worth. Life became sweeter than she ever imagined. The pain of the past only made the joy of the present shine brighter. Elena thanked everyone who had read her story and supported her. She said the encouragement helped her turn her graveyard into a garden. A place where hope could grow again. For her, that was the ending she never expected but always deserved. And as her story closed, another one began. A different woman wrote in from another throwaway account. This time, the story was about judgment. About what it feels like to live under constant criticism from someone who claims to love you. She was 34. Her boyfriend was 36. And they had been together for nearly 2 years. Though he still technically rented his own place, he spent most of his time living with her. At first, things seemed steady, but as time went on, she began to feel a gnawing uneasiness whenever he was around. It was the way he corrected everything she did, as if there were always a right way and a wrong way. And her way was always wrong. It was the patronizing comments, the subtle digs, the way she felt like she was constantly being observed. At first, she tried to brush it off. She told herself he was just trying to help. But the longer it went on, the more it wore her down. Her self-esteem began to crumble. She judged herself for things she had never cared about before. Arguments about it always ended the same way, with him insisting she was twisting his words, or accusing her of making everything negative. One day, she performed a small act of kindness, leaving flowers at her sister-in-law's house. Instead of appreciating it, he nitpicked her arrangement, criticized her choices, and made her redo them. His voice became the one in her head, whispering that nothing she did would ever be enough. As time went on, Elena realized the constant stream of small criticisms was eroding her peace more deeply than she had wanted to admit. One afternoon, after Thomas made another offhand remark, she tried to explain that it was this steady interference that left her feeling like everything she did was under a microscope. To her, it felt like suffocation. To him, it was just harmless feedback. When he called something she did crazy, she assumed it was an insult. Later, he clarified he had meant it as a compliment. When he commented about a bow she tied, he insisted he was only trying to help because he thought she disliked her earlier attempt. Yet no matter the explanation, what stayed with her was the revelation that he admitted he saw millions of things wrong with her, millions of flaws, millions of imperfections. He simply chose not to voice them. That confession lingered in Elena's mind like a shadow. She wondered if she was being too sensitive, or if she was simply seeing the truth of her situation for the first time. Was she mistaking someone else's opinion for judgment? Or was she finally recognizing that she had been living with a man who measured her by a cruel and impossible standard? The comments from him grew sharper. Instead of asking how her day had gone, he would frame it as whether she got a lot done. He once mocked a pair of stained pants she wore around the house, saying they were the kind people wore when they wanted to look homeless. He told her he preferred her hair only when she styled it with large curls, dismissing the natural waves she had grown to accept. Once, when she pulled on a pair of slightly damp shorts, he even commented that she should change because he didn't want her to mess up her balance. Words that confused and humiliated her all at once. Elena worried she was becoming paranoid. But the truth was more painful. His constant low-grade unkindness had left her feeling bruised all over. One person online compared it to being injured. Even a gentle touch hurts if it lands on a bruise. And Thomas had covered her in them. Every small comment stung, no matter how lightly delivered. And unless he could acknowledge the damage he had done, unless he could admit the truth of his behavior, there could be no healing. If he refused, she would need to walk away. Otherwise, she was signing up for a lifetime of this quiet breaking. Eventually, Elena reached a breaking point. She confronted him, telling him how judged and scrutinized she felt. And his response was as chilling as it was honest. He admitted there were a million things wrong with her he simply didn't say. The weight of that truth settled heavily. She thanked those who had validated her pain, because their words had pulled her out of a fog. For months, she had been trapped in rumination, questioning herself, wondering if she was imagining everything. Their support helped her realize she wasn't being oversensitive. She was being diminished. She told Thomas she needed space. She told him if this was what it felt like when both of them were supposedly trying their best. Then something was terribly broken. She told him he had stopped treating her like a partner and instead saw her as a defective person to be corrected. She could not keep investing her life into someone who stripped her down piece by piece. Those first days apart were like a vacation, a taste of freedom she had forgotten existed. Simple acts, cooking, dressing, even moving about the apartment, felt lighter without his constant surveillance. At the same time, Elena began to see that part of her pain came from within. She had been insecure, and his criticisms only magnified wounds she had long ignored. For a while, things seemed to improve. He criticized less, or perhaps he had simply changed tactics. Elena tried to convince herself that progress had been made, but deep down she knew the bar had only been lowered further. Then came the sciatica flare. The pain was excruciating, lasting weeks. She tried everything: therapy, medication, ice, stretching, but nothing eased it. She felt vulnerable, frightened, uncertain if she would ever heal. Instead of supporting her, Thomas grew impatient, treating her as though she were lazy, accusing her of exaggeration. When she finally tried to explain how alone and afraid she felt, he mocked her tears, sneering at her for crying instead of speaking like a normal person. Something broke inside her that night. Arguments now left her shaking, her body reacting with a rush of panic she couldn't control. Her stomach twisted, her hands trembled, and the tears came whether she wanted them or not. She realized she had been living not in partnership, but in fear. She thought of the comments she had once read online. describing relationships like hers as escapes into emotional abuse. And in that moment, she could no longer deny it. She remembered every time she had caught him lying, every instinct that told her he was hiding something. She remembered the way he poured his attention onto strangers online, the way he twisted blame, the way accountability always slid off him like water. She remembered doubting herself, and how those doubts had led her, against her own boundaries, to search his phone, looking for proof she was not imagining the betrayal she felt. And what she found would finally confirm what her heart had been screaming all along. When I think back, the signs had always been there, scattered like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to put together. I remember the night Nathan insisted we deliver a bottle of champagne to one of his friends as a way of congratulating them on a new job. At the time, something felt off, though I couldn't place why. I smiled, I went along, and I told myself I was overthinking again. Months later, when I looked back at the texts from that night, I realized the truth. They weren't dropping off champagne. They were delivering cocaine. Once I started confirming that my instincts hadn't been wrong, it was like the dam broke. Tinder during the first 6 months. Bumble for almost 9. Plenty of Fish for nearly a year. Conversations with other women hidden and deleted. Secret drug use buried beneath lies. The list goes on. And even now it's hard to remember every detail because my mind feels shredded by it all. But as painful as it was, each confirmation brought with it a strange, sharp relief. Everything my gut had been screaming at me since the beginning was true. I had been fighting a battle against myself, and I was losing. That realization broke me, but it also freed me. I started to ask myself the questions I had avoided for 2.5 years. Why did I stay, even when my body was trying to reject the relationship? My hair began thinning within 3 months of being with him. I developed brain fog and memory problems, when I had once been known for never forgetting a single detail. I lost sleep, gained weight, lost it again, fluctuating as though my body was fighting to find balance in the middle of chaos. Somehow I couldn't see clearly that he was the cause. Or maybe I was just too afraid to admit it. Therapy has been the first lifeline I've given myself. 3 sessions in, with more scheduled every week. And I've already learned something I wish I had known years ago. I was taught not to trust my own feelings. My father, who I now suspect was a narcissist, convinced me as a child that my instincts were unreliable, even selfish. That training carried into adulthood. It's why I ignored my intuition with Nathan. Why I silenced myself until my body broke down. Now, for the first time, I'm learning to listen again. I want to break the toxic patterns I've carried for so long. Therapy is helping me put myself first. Not in a selfish way, but in a survival way. I want a relationship with myself that doesn't involve self-betrayal. That's my new priority. And yet, despite this growing clarity, living under the same roof with Nathan has been unbearable. For the last few weeks, we've been in separate bedrooms. A quiet arrangement that only highlights the chasm between us. The confrontation that began this separation was brutal. I said things I didn't want to say. Shouted names and insults that had built up inside me over years of neglect and lies. I regret the way my anger spilled out. But I also know it came from a place of deep hurt. A few weeks ago, I thought I still owed him a final discussion about why we were breaking up. Why this wasn't working. Why I needed to leave. But the truth is, I don't owe him explanations anymore. After this deadline passes at work, I plan to end it once and for all. Not because of a list of reasons or because I think he'll finally understand. But because I want it to be over. That's enough. I'm even prepared to pay for movers. Just to make sure there's a set date when he'll be gone from this house in Summerfield. I'm terrified of his reaction. I know the words he'll use will be cruel. Sharp enough to dig at my deepest insecurities. But I also know, for the first time in years, that I can withstand it. The support I've received online has been a light in the darkness. When I first shared my story, I didn't expect much, but reading the responses made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in so long. That day shook me awake. It forced me to stop internalizing everything and start listening to the voice inside that had been screaming to be heard. There's one last thing I've carried with me. In my first post, I pretended not to understand when Nathan made that crude comment about the shorts with the wet waistband. I downplayed it, paranoid, waiting to see if anyone else would read it the same way I did. When I reread that post recently, it hit me differently. It wasn't just cruel, it was sad. A reminder of just how far I had let myself sink. My story has had so many twists and turns already. But at its core, the truth is simple. This relationship has broken me. And now, I have to let it go before it destroys me completely. As Clara sat in the quiet of her apartment in Summerfield, the weight of every warning she had received pressed against her chest. Friends and strangers alike had urged her not to face Adrian alone. They told her stories of women who thought they were safe, only to find themselves trapped in the darkest of endings. One voice in particular haunted her, the woman who said her best friend had been murdered by her husband the night she finally tried to leave. That thought made Clara's stomach turn cold. She was only 33, and already life had taught her that fear often lingered closer than love. Her closest friend, Miriam, begged her to plan carefully. "Please, Clara," she whispered over the phone. "Don't let him corner you. Don't give him the chance. Have someone there. Anyone you trust. Don't be alone with him." Miriam's voice cracked with desperation, and Clara could hear the echoes of other warnings. "Change the locks. Hide your documents. Move your belongings where he can't touch them." Adrian was older, 42, and he carried an edge that had turned sharper every day since she had begun pulling away. His temper had a way of spilling into every corner of her life. A reminder that safety was something she could no longer take for granted. When the night came to end things, Clara's body trembled as though it already knew the storm about to break. She asked her cousin Daniel to be nearby, sitting in his car outside her apartment. She couldn't risk doing this alone. Every second of waiting stretched thin, filled with the echoes of her memories, his lies, his gaslighting, the suffocating feeling of being trapped inside a relationship that stripped her of joy. The hardest part wasn't leaving Adrian. It was facing the reality of how close she had come to losing herself completely. Clara stood by the door, ready to open it for Adrian one final time. Her hand pressed against the wood as if she could absorb some strength from it. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered to herself, "This is the last time." She didn't know if he would shout, if he would plead, or if his anger would erupt into something worse. All she knew was that she could not look back. And when the door opened, the air in the room shifted, the beginning of an ending that felt like both freedom and fear woven into one fragile thread. Clara's story echoes the experiences of too many people today who find themselves trapped in toxic or abusive relationships. What stands out most is how dangerous the moment of leaving can truly be. Abusers often lash out when they realize their control is slipping. This is why the advice she received, "Don't do it alone. Prepare an escape plan. Move your belongings somewhere safe. Change your locks," remains critically important. These are not just precautionary steps. They can be life-saving actions. If you or someone you know is in a similar situation, the first thing to remember is that leaving is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage. Yet courage must be paired with caution. Tell trusted friends or family members what is happening. Keep a record of abusive behavior if it is safe to do so. And have an exit plan that prioritizes safety above all else. Even simple measures, like having someone present during the breakup or choosing a public location, can make a world of difference. Emotional trauma does not disappear the moment you leave, and healing often feels like an uphill climb. But acknowledging your pain and seeking support, through therapy, support groups, or trusted friends, helps rebuild the pieces of yourself that were broken. Remember, love should never be built on fear, control, or manipulation. Recognizing the warning signs early, and respecting your own boundaries, may protect you from losing years of your life to someone who never truly valued you. Your safety, your peace, and your future are worth protecting. Always.